wasn't like she just had blackout periods, but she's like, I guess it's possible I don't remember this girl at all. Carly's walking closer to her. She's like, you did come to my house real quick. Like, I can show you photo albums and like of all the stuff we used to do together. We used to have so much fun. You were like my best friend. And Crystal's like, oh, which house is yours? And she's like, oh, I just live right on the other side of those trees right there. Just come with me real quick. I can show you. And Crystal said she just felt this like nagging thing inside of her saying like something isn't right about this. She's like, no, it's okay. Like my dad's waiting for me. Like maybe tomorrow we can catch up. And Carly's like more insistent. She's like, no, 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 just real quick, just come with me. Like my parents would love to see you. Crystal's like, she's like, no, I told my dad we were gonna watch a movie. Like I have to. And so Carly's just like, okay, like fine, maybe tomorrow, just come find me. So Crystal gets home and her dad's on the porch waiting for her and he's like, oh, it took you so long and he's already got like a beer open and everything. And she's like, oh, I actually just ran into one of my old friends, I guess, like Carly. She said I used to play with her all the time. And her dad's sitting there and he's like, Carly? Crystal's like, yeah, she said that you used to work with her dad and she lives right on the other side of those trees behind those houses on that cul-de-sac over there. And her dad's like, not playing with anybody named Carly. And he's like, and on the other side of the construction site, like they just leveled it. They used dynamite. They blew up that whole area. On the other side of those trees is a massive pit filled with rocks and rebar. He said it's a massive open pit. And maybe she thought you were someone else. And she's like, no, Dad. Like she knew my name. She knew about the accident. She knew where you lived. And she's like, are you sure I didn't hang out with anyone named Carly? And her dad gets real quiet. And he's like, no, like the only Carly that I know of is a guy that I used to work with had a daughter go missing named Carly like years before you were born, but you never knew her. And Crystal said she's 27 now. She's gone to visit her dad a number of times. She's never run into this girl again. She has actually reconnected with some of the kids that she played with when she went to visit her dad growing up, and none of them remember a Carly. She said she's told this story before because she genuinely does not understand what happened or who she encountered that day. So let her know what you think. She will be reading the comments.
That's scary.
If you have a story to submit, you can do that on my website, dogoodstaybad.com. There's a story submissions page, and just let me know in your submission if you would like me to keep you anonymous or not. I'm always happy to change names or to give you credit where credit's due. Thank you so much to everyone who continues to listen, supporting the channel by hyping the videos or sharing this with friends and family. And thank you so much to my patrons who support the channel financially. You guys help me bring me more stories every single week. This is a list of all of the people who support the channel already. And if you can't support the channel financially, that's totally cool too. I know that it's tough out there right now, but I appreciate each and every one of you more than you know. I can't wait to bring you more stories this year. Stay creepy, stay curious, question everything. You guys should know by now that I talk about every spooky subject under the sun. One thing that creeps me out more than almost anything, though, is state parks and national parks. Primarily because I've had a few creepy experiences myself, including one camping at the Indiana Dunes. What used to be state park is now a national park. And I'm going to include that story in this compilation today. But the rest of the stories are all listener submitted from people who say that they've had, to say the least, unsettling experiences in state or national parks. We've got stories from the Grand Canyon. We've got stories about Capitol Reef National Park. We've got a secondhand story from someone who used to work in national parks and believes there's feral people there. So we've got a little bit of everything. If you're new here, Spooky Scary Story Time is my series where I share all of your allegedly true, creepiest experiences, the ones that you think nobody else will believe. My name's Ashley. If you want to submit a story, please do. We love to hear it. We're going to get right to it. This is my story, and then we'll follow it up with the listener stories. As always, I love you. Thank you for being here. Let's get right to it. Tell me a story about a time that you saw something that you have no explanation for. I'll tell you mine. Story time about the time I went camping and saw someone or something come into my tent, and I still have no explanation 10 years later. In 2014, I was dating a guy, and we decided we were going to go camping in Indiana Dunes State Park. If you've never been there, it's actually gorgeous. It's 2,000 acres of Lake Michigan access, huge sand dunes, and campground. I grew up camping there with my family in the summers, and I was very familiar with it. So we went to the campsite.
Listening to scary stories.
During the week. Tattooer and I was bartender, so it just worked best for our schedule.
It's been raining a lot. I'm in Florida.
RVs, I can probably count them on one hand with electrical hookups and drive all the way back to our campsite. Our campsite was called primitive camping, which means there's no electrical hookups. And we brought a bunch of kids, so we spent the night like cooking and hanging out by the fire. The whole time we're there, we don't see a single other person besides when we drove to the general store about 2 miles away to pick up firewood and then drove back. But nobody camping around us, nobody walking, like nobody within even earshot of us. We had a few light drinks, but we weren't big drinkers, so I feel like this is important because I told people this story and they're like, oh, were you on anything? And the answer is no. The fire's almost out, it's smoldering, and we decided to go to bed about 2 o'clock in the morning. I don't know what time this was, but it was still dark out, so between 2 and 6 in the morning when the sun comes up. But I woke up to the sound of black figure illuminated by the smoldering campfire in the background. Can't make out his features, but obviously it's my ex coming in after I roll over and I go to sleep. I wake up morning at 10. He's already out by the fire making campfire coffee.
Yeah, I can, I think.
he's like, hey, if you wake up in the middle of the night and go to the bathroom, just wake me up. Like, it's probably not good for you to be out in the dark by yourself. I was like, I didn't leave the tent last night, but I saw you coming through the tent and you left.
I can't say that.
You're both shook like me. But
I'm just tired. Mhm. I'm listening to spooky stories. My daughter is taking a nap
so I have to
with myself.
bring my friend though, who is a park ranger in where I live now. Like, the park ranger would not have opened your tent without announcing it. Two is that it was an intoxicated person who lost the way back to their own campsite and I saw that Mark was there. I feel like it's for more reason, especially if you're intoxicated and now you cannot know
Excuse me.
where you're. Three would pick me on the most is the thought that if somebody with malicious intent that opened up a tent on the side and decided against acting on what they were going to do. My and I both considered the fact that there's for example, breakfast or craft different, but we both distinctly saw a human figure staring at the tent. Well, I know this is not the scariest story I ever told. It is still one of the most terrifying things that ever happened to me, knowing that someone's not in a vulnerable state and sleeping and could have done what they wanted. I still don't like state parks 10 years later, and I think about this quite often. They're not actually they're feral people. According to one woman who standard emailed me for a story time, and she said the also her theory on why so many people go missing in U.S. national parks vanishing without a trace. She grew up in Wyoming and when she was 21, her aunt gave her a job as a bartender at this dive bar in a small town. Place opened in the early 90s, but this was 2001 when Sandra started working there, and her aunt had started as a bartender and knew all the regulars who would come. Especially old people, old people, action. Most of the came in every day. She started working there with her. No longer probably can expect of a dive that are super obnoxious, some people that want to knock your head off, and other people that are just kind of quiet, come in every day, have the same thing. And one of these guys is really quiet. His name is Hank. You guys know I love that name. If you know, you know. But anyway, he describes Hank as basically like a retired cowboy. He had sun leather skin, wore the same flannel every single day, regardless of the weather. And he didn't say much. He came in to drink one beer. So he was there about 2 hours. He didn't really talk to anybody. But some of the other guys that drank there knew him. Everybody there called him the cracker behind his back. Tanner's answer that he had been coming in since she started working there. Like the day the bar opened, this guy was coming in. That nice enough, always get $2 on his beer. Nobody really knows anything about it. All this grapher because some of the guys that used to work for the government, something in wildlife, although they didn't know exactly what. He's kind of a quiet background figure at the bar for 2 years until this one night she closed the bar down and all that's in the bar is her, Hank, and then this other guy who's drunk and talking her head. And somehow this happens that Bigfoot comes up. She doesn't remember exactly how, but this guy's going on and on about how people see Bigfoot. And he just looks up and he says, Bigfoot's not real, but there's something worse out there. Into other conversations. She had rarely heard him talk. So immediately she looked at him and he's not smiling. He doesn't look like he's getting it. What do you mean? She said this is the only person he ever told her in the year he worked there. He said, you're so in the Medicine Bow National Forest. It was just him, his dog, and his pew-pew. And don't yell at me for using stupid words. You guys know I have to do that. Then around dusk, something was off. The forest suddenly went silent. There were no bird or insect sounds, and he thought that there was a predator in this area. Thought he was getting close to the cougar, but then he finds a deer. What he described to her was pretty graphic, so I'm going to glaze over it, but I will say that he said that he determined that it was not destroyed by a cougar, or any other wildlife for that matter. Parts of its hide had been peeled in a very rudimentary way, suggesting that someone had tried to skin it, but didn't know exactly how. He had a bad feeling. He decided to head back to his truck, but his dog would not bud. His dog was staring off in the woods, and that's when he heard the whispering. He said they were voices, but they didn't sound right. They were almost mocking, and he could only make out one word, which sounded like a very robotic help. He felt very unsettled despite being a man of the wilderness for years and years. He leaves. The next day, he calls one of his old military buddies, and they go back to the same spot where they find a rudimentary large shacks made of branches and trees and trash, ropes hanging from branches of trees, scraps of clothing, and a child's shoe. There was a campfire smoldering outside one of the shacks, suggesting that someone had been there before they arrived, and they heard the same voice that he had heard the day before, saying, help. He said in the same tone, that same robotic help, and if he didn't know any better, he would have thought it would be safe to look for it. Yeah, they just got the hell out. Was what he saw was what government knows that there are recent feral that's why you can anytime I could go finish stuff that they don't stop. This because he used to work as a federal contract employee that went in when something strange happened on federal land. Disappearances, disturbances, campsites torn apart with no signs of animals. Sometimes his team would find human footprints alongside claw marks, just stuff that didn't make sense. He said they were trained not to ask questions, just to track, document, and clear the area. He said they were instructed to report the location of the never and found a cave system rigged with traps. Although they found snares made from bones, makeshift torches, and writing on the wall in what looked like gibberish with who knows what. And that cave was less than 2 miles from a missing persons report, which was then closed off to the public. And he says the reason that they won't go public with this information is simple: panic. He said if people knew there were whole communities of feral, violent, and human adjacent people living in national forests, people who don't follow laws, who don't recognize civilization, who don't even speak the way we do, it would cause chaos. Tourism would take, hunting and fishing licenses would drop, and national parks would become ghost towns. But he said there's no solution. You can't just round them up because then you'd have to admit that they
This
exist.
is great.
Human rights violations. Said, assuming they're still human. So instead, Hank said they just don't talk about it. They write off disappearances as accidents, or at least shut down trails where the sightings are too frequent, keep people away with signs that say damage or trail maintenance. He said the reason that people still see them is because there's too many to hide, but not enough to fight. So they just wait quietly and wait for people to wander off the trail. After he told her that story, he just sits back and finishes fear.
That's interesting.
More, but he never forgot it either. So what do you think? Crazy guy in a bar, or did he know something
Everybody's showing themselves now, right? So I might as well, right?
Camp near Bright Angels Point, you might see something glowing in the cliffs long after sunset, like an office building covered in rock. And in fact, these lights are so common that some locals in northern Arizona have a name for
Sure.
this
Shout
story.
out JP Rods 34.
It's important to note that these stories started back in the 1950s when a group of park rangers reported seeing a column of
JP
fire
Rods 30.
rising from the Grand Canyon floor. Mysteriously, the ranger logs from that week
If I'm saying that right.
this story came from Meredith. She says last spring she and two friends were camping on the north rim of the Grand Canyon near Bright Angel Point. Now, that part of the park is closed for a lot of the year, but they were camping in May, partially because they wanted to go before all the crowd showed up. And where they were camping was just outside of the official boundary of the park. It was down an old Forest Service road just off of Point Sublime Trail. Now, were camping at. And once the sun went down, it was total darkness, total silence. They went to bed early. She woke up around midnight needing to pee, and so she went off to the bathroom. That's when she noticed a faint blue light coming from deep within the canyon. She thought at first maybe it was a headlamp, but this was coming from deep below the rim, way past any campsite, way past any trail. She quickly rules out that it's a headlight or a flashlight because it felt pretty short first and then it went dark. She could not, for the life of her, figure out what it was. So she woke up her friends. They went to the room again and they were looking for this light, and that's when it reappeared. But this time there were more of them. The original light lit up, and then there was another one to the east, but she said this must have been miles from the original light. They all stood at the edge watching, and they see a third light come on, and they're all pulsing and blinking in different patterns and different rhythms, and it almost seems like they're sending signals to each other. That's when she said something happened that she still can't really explain, but her friends saw it too. The whole canyon, for a split second, lit up as if from within. She said, I swear to you, it looked like there were actual windows glowing behind the rock face like an office building lit up at night. She said you could even make out the pattern, square shapes of light stacked in rows fading deep within the canyon. And then she said as suddenly as it lit up, it went dark, and that's when they heard a low mechanical hum coming from deep down below them. And at that point, they noticed a dark helicopter that swept over the rim. It was totally dark, totally unmarked, and without lights. She said they didn't even hear it until it was almost right above them, but it turned into the gorge and then disappeared from sight. When the helicopter disappeared, the three lights that they saw originally also went out completely. The next day, they went over to the overlook at Bright Hill Point, and there were no signs of campsites or anything from down below that could have explained what they experienced the night before, but they couldn't find anything. From the radio, but probably just survey drones. Meredith said she asked him, like, what kind of survey drone can make the inside of a canyon look like an office building, and he didn't answer. They stayed one more night, but he didn't notice anything. So they camped that night, and then the following morning they left and were driving toward Jacob Lake, and they were going to grab some breakfast. They ended up stopping at a diner that she said looked like it had been there forever, and their server was this older woman with her hair pulled tight into a gray bun. But she was late, she was making conversation with them, and so they told her about the black helicopter and the lights they saw in the canyon. But this woman didn't even bat an eye. She's like, oh, you saw them, huh? And they're like, no, we saw them. What do you mean? Yeah, y'all aren't the first people this month to see them. We call them the canyon's pulse. And then she leaves in and she's like, back when I started here, the rangers used to come in here and they would talk about these pulsing lights and nobody knew what they were. Not even the rangers. They would show up, they would pulse, a black helicopter would fly down, and then they would all go out. Meredith and her friends pressed her for a more concrete answer, but said generally they didn't want. That some people say they're survey drones, and that makes sense, sure. Other people think it's related to the Cold War experiments they were doing at Camp Navajo. She tells them that they'll never admit to anything, though. But then she says, I think that it's the canyon itself. I think the canyon watches people. I think it's a lie. And then Meredith and her friends are like, "Why do you think that?" Woman smiles. She says, "Yeah, when I was young, I was hiking with my brother, and I swear the whole canyon lit up like a city. There were lights coming from everywhere, and I just felt Dixie Canyon wanted to be seen. I can't explain it further than that. It's a feeling that I." And so Meredith's like, "Well, has anyone else around here seen it, or what do they think?" And this old woman's just like, "Nobody around here thinks anything. Everybody around here knows." Meredith said she went back to the Grand Canyon twice, and although she hasn't seen the lights again, she just has a feeling now that there's something buried in it in plain sight. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. I've only been to the Grand Canyon once. There, too little for a love to eat local. Wait, give me a story about what happened after she got the staircase in the woods. He doesn't tell the story very often. He's not proud of his part of this. He wanted to be anonymous because he said he doesn't want anyone to know his history who doesn't already know it, and there's a certain stigma attached to people with mental illness. So he doesn't want to come off as crazy to anyone who might not know his history on him. Trigger warning on the story, it does get a little bit dark. There was a story about 10 years ago. Now, he was like, with his 10-year-old son and 12-year-old daughter. Normal activity for them. They live not too far from there in Kentucky, but his wife was upset with it. Toby said up until this point was like he lived a relatively normal life. He had no history of mental illness or anger issues. He had a relatively good relationship with his wife, normal squabbles. He worked the same job for a normal American civilian life. So him and his kids come across the staircase in the middle of the woods. His son immediately goes to go up and goes, "Hey, make sure like it's stable. Actually, you know what? Let me go up first." Seth and family were like outdoor people, so it wasn't the first time that they had come across a staircase in the woods. A lot of times they're just left from old settlements or whatever, but this is the first time they saw that staircase. So he told his son that he's gonna climb it first, and he started descending the steps. He noticed that they were very clean, but it was fall weather, so there were no leaves on the staircase. So he walked all the way up to the top, standing at the top. Son's like, "How is it? Can I come up?" And he said, "Out of nowhere, he heard the voice. Later this day, say on the live them." He said it wasn't his voice, it wasn't his son's voice, it wasn't his daughter's voice. So he's like shocked. He looks around, there's nobody else out there. But he said he audibly heard the voice. So he said, what is going on? Climbed up the stairs, tells his son, "Don't go up there. It's not safe." The voice that he heard kind of shook him a little bit because he had never had a violent urge or children very much. Driving home, and he's struck with the urge to drive into oncoming traffic. They get home, his wife's like, "How was the hike?" He tells her it was fine. He doesn't tell her about the voice or anything. He said in the first few weeks after that hike, his change. It was a great box settled over everything. He was getting angry at very minor inconveniences. He was often hearing voices that told him to harm himself and others. He would wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares and cold sweats. And him and his wife, we're gonna just call her Kelly, they were arguing about everything. He would snap at her, and on one occasion he put his hands on her head and threw her to this day. Black eye shoots up a kid. We were all staying at her sister's house, and his voices only got worse. He was still going to work. He was trying to manage it. He had actually made an appointment with a therapist to try to get it under control. But before he went to the therapist's office, he ends up snapping at his boss over a minor email. I guess the boss said that he forgot to do something, and he marched into his boss's office and threatened his life. He said while he was staring at his boss, he was fuming. He looked at a pen that was sitting on his boss's table, and he had to fight the urge to stab him through the throat. Obviously, he gets fired. Security gets called. He is confronted out driving home, and a guy pulls off in traffic. They pull up at a light. The guy and him are like MFing each other through the window, and all of a sudden he just snaps. He gets out of his car. He goes over to the other guy's car, tries the door, and he pulls the wire. After the man started having seizures, ends up getting an aggravated assault charge. He goes to jail. He was sentenced to 3 years, but he said we're going to be released after 3 months. After he was released, part of its release parole was court ordered therapy. In there, he was diagnosed as a schizophrenic, and he's still living with that diagnosis today. He's trying to manage it. He still hears the voices. A lot of times they talk about going back to the staircase in the woods. He says he's still have nightmares about it. He is working on rebuilding the relationship with his kids. So starting kind of come back around. He says he's turned on. He's turned his life around, but every day struggle that his voices. He says staircase in the woods phenomenon is a rabbit hole, and he supported it. A lot of other people, I guess, have gone up staircases and felt like they had attached them after a sense of therapist who told them that it's a mental disorder and that you're doing everything you can to manage it. But he ended his email with a warning. He said if you come across a staircase in the woods, don't go up. And it's really mental health. It's better to talk to somebody now. Thank you for sharing your story. I know it's really heavy. I wish you all the best and healing, and I hope everything gets better. Everybody else is sitting here, you figured unbelievable things you think you know, ever told me, or you don't want to tell. Send me those stories. Keep asking. Spooky Scary Storytime submission was sent in by Alyssa, and she said she wanted to send this story to see if me or any of my audience knew what she and her father witnessed camping near Capitol Reef National Park in Utah. Alyssa said she and her entire family loves camping, but especially her dad, and they do many camping trips every single year together. Her dad is an experienced outdoorsman, and a couple of years ago in early September, they decided they were going to go camp for a couple days in central Utah in this very dense forest area filled with pine trees and quake trees. So when it got dark there, it got dark really fast. Because they were staying because the first night they're there, they have separate tents. Okay, she's in her tent with her dog, and they hear this growling, this barking coming from the forest. She thought there must be other campers nearby that she didn't see on the hike up. Her dog was whining and whimpering a little bit, but she just tried to comfort him, and they went back to sleep. The next morning, she got up when it was still kind of dark out. She grabbed the flashlight, she goes to the dog, and as soon as she unzipped the tent, she is hit with the most horrible smell. She follows her dog out to go to the bathroom, and she comes across this coyote that's been absolutely mutilated. She described this thing as having been put through a wood chipper. That's how bad it was. So she turns around to go back to the tent. She tries to grab her dog, and all of a sudden she feels like she's being watched. Every single hair on her neck stands up. Her dog starts growling and snarling and barking, which is very out of character for him. So she puts her hand on her hunting knife because she's like, "There's a mountain lion out there." She's yelling to make as much noise as possible so her dad knows where she is, and will hopefully also this thing that she can't see but assumes is out there will back off. She said she started to pray because even though she's never really been one much for religion, she just felt like it would help, and it did in the moment. Because as soon as she started praying, she said she felt better, and her dog stopped snarling, being watched and spawned her way back to the tent. They're camping for 4 days, so it's on day 4. She's pretty much forgotten about this coyote. She figured it was just nature. She doesn't really think anything of that snarling and barking she heard the first night. She's laying in bed in her tent on the 4th night when she hears this loud guttural scream coming from outside in the woods. She said it didn't seem human, it didn't seem animal. My first thought again was mountain lion. Her dog started snarling and barking, and she hears this labored, wet breathing coming from outside the tent. She said it sounded like it stopped right that I told you what, I couldn't make it to my dad's tent, so I just started praying again, but it didn't seem to help. Her dog was going crazy. She was trying to calm him down, but things started circling and her breath and its dragging of its feet around the tent. Finally, a woman came in and ran to her dad's tent, unzipped it, found him in prayer. She said this was like I've never seen something. God never heard an utter a prayer out of his mouth. Stayed in the tent, grabs his firearm. They look out the tent and they see something hairy and bony and dark, standing on 2 legs, dragging a full-grown deer into the tent. As soon as the distant Carolina, they didn't know the other skin got the scream coming from them. And we had stuff like that in there. We booked it out of there. We have not been back camping there since I believe it was a demon. But she said, I'm really just sharing this to see what your followers think, what your audience thinks, because if it wasn't a demon, I don't know what it was. It's very clearly on 2 legs. It was not an animal. People, I don't know. Story about the rainbow people of medicine. And then like people they came from someone in Elena. Elena is basically an amateur photographer in Florida, and by part of the rainbow family. Okay, she clarified that that is not the same thing as the rainbow. For now, I don't know. The rainbow family is like there are hang out and fun and club. But the rainbow family up to one of these gatherings. There's a gal with us that's just really fun. But ways particular we'll call her welcome. Hey, you guys like that's the one that takes Elena under the wing, kind of going their philosophy, right? So that night they're all sitting around the fire, having a good time, and they start drunk. It's a drunk people, like really like anything. Explain Elena. He's like, therefore, what was
You want some rice? Everyone's awake. Time to end the live.